Welcome to Ask GMBN Tech. This is our weekly Q&A show. As you can see, I'm lucky to be out here in Alpe d'Huez in the Alps, where I promised you an Alpine special, and everyone's been getting their questions in, mainly via Instagram. So I've pulled up a bunch of questions here, and we're just going to run with this and see what we can help you out with. So the first one on the list is from Instadash. What's the minimum or maximum travel you would always want on your forks for rocky terrain, or is it always the case of more travel is better? Well, yeah, I guess kind of more travel can be better because you can arguably handle rougher terrain. But I've ridden passports to Soleil before on a 120mm fork on a 100mm bike, and all right, it did feel a little bit rowdy at times, but it's absolutely fine. You just have to ride within your limits. Don't forget that it doesn't matter how much suspension you've got on your bike. If you haven't got the skills to ride that bike, it's not really going to be a benefit to you, and sometimes a longer travel bike can actually be a hindrance. But all things considered, my regular bike here, my Nukeproof's got 150 on the back and it's got 160 on the front. I would consider taking up to 170 on the front, which is something I've seen the Nukeproof race guys do, so it's going to obviously handle that without messing up the geometry too much. But I don't really think it's about the amount of travel, I think it's how well you set your bike up. In particular, the suspension. If you get it dialed in and you've got a decent amount of rebound, you've got your compression sorted so it doesn't hurt your hands, and it feels really comfortable, you're going to get all the traction and support you need. And there's also air volume adjustment now. That makes a significant difference to how comfortable the fork is and how it handles bigger hits. So it really is down to how you set things up rather than what the tool for the job is. I've also ridden a hardtail with 100mm travel before down a mountain, and all right, it's a bit rowdy at times, but you can do it. It's not really a problem. So don't go looking for new excuses to get kit. Just make sure what you have is set up appropriately. Next up, I think this name's written backwards for his handle. I think it's Russell Bryn or Bryn Russell. What are some main bike setup differences? I guess you mean as opposed to day-to-day stuff. Well, there's quite a few things you can do. So obviously when you're riding in alpine terrain, it's quite rough on your body and on your bike. So firstly, you want to make sure you've got some quite large volume tyres and they're quite sturdy. Downhill casing is a good idea if you want to really preserve your bike and have maximum control, but they do cost quite a lot of money and they do weigh quite a lot. So if you don't want to go down that route, you can get some tyre inserts. Now, you don't have to get the most expensive ones like the Cush cores. There's various others on the market, like those Nukeproof ARDs. There's various ones around, and they do a great job of helping protect your tyre from getting sliced by the rim hitting against rocks and things. And also it does a great job of helping protect your rims, which take an absolute battering on the rocky terrain. Whilst you're doing that, it's a good idea, I think, to put in some extra sealant into your tyres. It can't be a bad thing when you're riding terrain where you're likely to burp the tyre here and there. Burping, in case you don't know, is when literally your tyre burps a small amount of air out and then seals again. So you're going to lose a couple of pounds of pressure potentially, but seals again afterwards. Your cockpit position, as you might see on my bike, I've got a really high-rise bar on here. That does tend to be my day-to-day preference, to be honest, but I have put it up a little higher than usual. So currently I've got two big spacers underneath and I've got two smaller ones, the 5mm ones on the top there. It does give me basically the ability to move it up and down a little if I need to. On this trip, I've not felt the need to so far. My bars are a 780, no, I lie, the bars are an 800mm and they're a 38mm rise, and I do roll them back very slightly when I'm riding more alpine terrain. In the UK, I tend to have them quite neutral or perhaps a slight bias to forwards. Brake levers also, I run them quite high. Higher brake levers are, the less your forearms have to work to hold on, and you also basically put the pressure of the bars on your hand, on the heel of your hand a bit more, rather than resting on your thumb, which can cause a bit of grip problems. I don't change my grips, but I do know people change their handlebar grips for something a little bit more comfortable, perhaps like a mushroom profile, like you used to see on the old ODI Roughnecks. They're really comfortable alpine grips, although when they're wet, they're really slippy, so you do need to run them with gloves. Brake rotors up front, go for the biggest one that you can get. So up on mine, I've got like a 203 on the front there, and I've also got the finned brake pads. Now my brakes aren't anything special, they're the regular stock XTs, they're basically plenty powerful enough for any of this stuff, although 4-pot ones you can have even more control and more power, and your hands are going to be doing less. So really the most powerful brakes you can get are going to make a trip slightly more enjoyable, but you don't need to buy new brakes. On the rear I've just got a 180, although to be honest, if I was spending any longer out here, I'd definitely have a bigger rotor, because you do tend to drag that quite a lot just to help control your speed, even though as soon as it locks up it's not doing that job. Tyre inserts, I've mentioned that. Frame protection really is the last big one with bike setup. You can't see on this frame, but I've got an InvisiFrame kit. It's basically 3M heli tape all over the bike, so it's going to get chipped from flying rocks and stuff, and when it goes on the chairlifts and things like that, from time to time you're going to bash up against others, and of course, let's not forget, you're going to crash time to time, so having a kit like that on your bike really does help it against bashes and stuff. You might want to look at some down tube protection in particular, especially if you've got a carbon bike. Really good idea, especially on the underside of the down tube in the region down towards the bottom bracket. I don't need to do anything on this bike because there's a big rubber protector built into it, and a lot of bike manufacturers do that now, but if you haven't, I'd definitely consider looking at making your own one. One way of doing that is get yourself some Scotch mastic tape. I think it's M2228 is the one. They're doing 25 and 50mm widths, and it's basically self-masticating rubber, and it's really thick and it can stick pretty much anywhere you put it. It doesn't leave a residue, so you can remove it afterwards. That's also great for putting on your chain stays, inside of your seat stays, anywhere you want a bit of extra protection from stuff, and to silence things too. That's pretty much that. Okay, next one is from Andy C, MTB Wales. Guessing you're not Andy C from Ram Records, the really good drum and bass DJ. If you are Andy C, hi, let's go for a ride sometime. I love your music. But question from Andy C, MTB Wales. Question, can you protect your derailleur on some of those huge rocky fire road descents? Our group lost a few derailleurs last weekend at Passports de Soleil and quite a few spokes on the rocky fire roads. Now, back in the day, you could used to get these steel protectors. It was like a loop of steel, but I don't think they would protect your rear derailleur against strikes. It's more if you bash your bike against the ground or a rock in the event of a crash. And to be honest, I think you'd struggle to fit one nowadays. I do think it's something that someone needs to address though, because the rear mech is such a fragile thing. And I know some sort of advanced people out there will be saying, oh, get rid of it, you know, get a belt drive and a gearbox, but it's not that simple for most riders that still use the good old rear derailleur. Yeah, they're a pain in the arse. The best thing you can really do is take a spare one with you and a spare hanger. And if you're that bothered that it might happen, and I know the Passports routes quite a lot, and I've had the same problems over the years, if you had, for example, an XT derailleur on your bike, before going on a trip like that, I'd invest in a cheaper derailleur like an SLX and keep your XT as a spare. That way, if and when you do manage to smash that derailleur, you're not going to cry quite as much, and you still have your other one as a spare. Definitely better than having an XTR one smashed off. And in fact, just behind Jack the cameraman, we've just been watching a guy looking for his rear derailleur. I think he snapped his chain and bottomed out and stuff. His derailleur came off the bike. The poor guy's been walking up and down looking for it, but I didn't have the heart to tell him if it's come off the bike, it's going to be absolutely trashed anyway, so there's no point. So that's about the best you can do for that. I guess you could put some of that mastic rubber on some of it just to help it fend off rocks, but it's not going to do too much, to be honest. They're pretty vulnerable. Yeah, so invest in a cheap one for your trip and then replace it afterwards when you're back at home. Next question is from the Aldridge. Do you change cockpit setup to cope with the steepness of tracks? Yeah, actually, I've kind of addressed that already. I run my brake levers a lot higher than usual. In fact, I still might go up higher than they are now, nearer to a horizontal position. I run them inboard a little bit more, so they're right on the knuckle of my finger there. High-rise bar, and I run it nice and high in the stem there. Next up's from Pencil Boy MTB. Does hot or cold air temperatures have an effect on the way suspension works? And Trax Factory, on a similar note, says, do you need to adjust suspension air pressure to compensate for higher altitude? I think you're going to get mixed opinions on a lot of these things. Now, for suspension air pressure, no, I don't think so. I think you set your sag up to suit the riding that you're doing. Of course, you have base settings and then slightly more advanced ones. For somewhere like this, I'm running it slightly softer out back than I might normally do and slightly firmer up front, just to try and keep the bike up there. Also running volume spacers in the front and a little extra low speed compression just to help with that. But that does tend to change throughout trips as well. As you get more tired, your hands get more fatigued, you start backing things off and just dealing with a bike that's a bit softer. I think I'm not alone in that. I know Blake's done changes like that in the past. On longer trips, we start getting fatigued. If it does change your air pressure, it's going to be marginal. Now, I did hear at the Andorra World Cup recently that tyre pressures could vary, and it did depend on the volume of the rim, how wide the rim is, the volume of the tyre even, the size of the tyre. There could be up to 2 psi difference between the top of the course and the bottom of the course. So Again, I don't think you can really change for that. You've got to set the tyres up to work where you need them to work and just get on with riding the tracks. Hot and cold, I'm pretty sure it doesn't, to be honest, although I am interested in finding out. I might put Henry on the case because he loves a good geek out with this sort of thing. Next up from Alex Lee 03. What kind of bikes are best for Alpine single track? XC bikes, as they have moderate travel and can cover ground both up or down, or an enduro bike to add a bit more sturdiness to allow for an aggressive descent. I'd actually go bang in the middle and say a trail bike. So XC bikes have typically around 100mm travel, and enduro bikes 160 and upwards. I would say anything from 120 to 150 is absolute like bang on for Alpine single track, for general riding where you're going to be doing a bit of climbing, a bit descending, and you want that control. And there's also an element of the style of rider you are and your riding ability as well. I've known some riders race pretty much XC bikes on terrain like this and they're comfortable with it, whereas some people just wouldn't want to go near it. They want the security of having a bike with more travel, bigger footprint with the tyres, you know, all that sort of stuff, the relaxed angles. So do take that into account. You know, I did Passport to Soleil a few years back on a borrowed Lapierre that had, I think, 100 out back and 120 on the front. It had skinny little Maxxis Ardent tyres with inner tubes, and I was kind of dreading getting a puncture, but I think I was the only one in the group that didn't get a puncture, possibly because I was so concerned about slicing it all open that I rode a bit more conservatively. But just show that, you know, you can ride pretty much any bike on this sort of terrain. It's just up to your comfort zone. Braking though is a good idea, so make sure you have brakes that are up to it. Brakes that are on XC bikes with tiny little rotors, you're going to cook them a bit quicker. So if you did want to take a bike with less travel off-road, still maybe invest in some slightly bigger disc rotors, and make sure you have some decent brake pads, perhaps like some sintered ones, as opposed to the resin ones, which will overheat a lot quicker. Okay, next one's from Dario Vermeulen. Can you make an aggressive 120mm travel AM bike more free ride stroke downhill capable? Well, if it's already aggressive, then yeah. All you've got to do really is go big time on the tyre selection on there. So maybe something with a little bit more volume, put some rim inserts in there to help protect those rims. You could consider slightly larger, wider rims because you're going to give a slightly bigger volume tyre by doing that. You could rake out the head angle with an angled headset. There's the Cane Creek angle set, there's the Works components, fixed cup angled headsets, and there's a few others available on the market. Bigger rise bar, bit more width, that does the same sort of thing. And you could have a slightly increased travel fork as well. That's always going to make things feel a bit more aggressive. So yeah, there's plenty of little tweaks you can make to a bike to make it a bit more suitable for this sort of stuff. And the last one is from Speedwobble29. What sort of gear do you recommend carrying on Alpine rides? Okay, so this is actually quite important. It does depend on who you're riding with. If you're riding with a big group, you could perhaps agree to share the load between you. But if you're riding in a small group, make sure you take a decent sized riding bag. Even if you're just doing some runs in a bike park, it can be a really long way down if you're having to nurse a bike down the hill. So of course you're going to need some basic tools. You're going to need a decent multi-tool. You're going to need a proper pump. You can't just rely on CO2 cartridges. And really you should save those for race situations. Using a pump is fine because, well, it's a bit better for the environment, isn't it, to have something you're going to be using constantly rather than having to recycle and throw things away. Make sure you carry a spare inner tube. Make sure that inner tube is a Presta valve. So even if it is not used by yourself, you could lend it to someone else that it would definitely fit their rims, whether they're drilled for Presta or Schrader. A tyre boot is a great idea to carry. You could do a homemade one, or you could get something like the Park Tools tyre boot. It sticks on the inside of your tyre carcass, so if you do slash a big one in the side of your tyre, you can stop, maybe have a bit of lunch while you're doing it, fix that tyre and then carry on your riding. Chain master links are a good idea. Make sure you carry one or two of those. You can get 11 speed, 12 speed, SRAM, Shimano. So it's good to carry a couple of options. I've got a SRAM one here and I've got a Shimano one in a bit of tape here, just so I know which one's which. Tyre plugs are also a great idea. These are all things that you can seal a tubeless tyre with. They basically look like little rubber worms, and they come with a little reaming tool and a little sort of stabbing tool to basically stab it into your tyre to plug that hole. Great things to carry with you. Tyre levers, of course, and any other tools you might need. Spare parts are important. Make sure you carry some chainring bolts and anything that's like a bit of a duplicate bolt. It's a good idea to carry a little clear zipped bag with a bunch of those in. Cable ties, of course, and electrical tape is a great idea to carry. They can be used to lash all sorts of things back onto a bike. water, of course, and some first aid basics. At the least, some good things to carry are some painkillers. You want to carry some sort of sling, so if you or your friends are unlucky enough to basically break an arm or collarbone, you can support that limb and help get them off the mountain. Skin closures or skin tags are a great idea to carry. Antiseptic wipes or some sort of stuff to clean cuts and basic things with is a good idea. And some rubber gloves, of course, because you're likely to be dirty or your gloves will be dirty, so something that you can treat a patient with if that's the case. A phone, make sure you have a phone that's charged, that it's got some sort of signal on it or the ability to ring for help. A camera, I always carry a camera with me. That's just me, you don't have to go crazy, but your phone camera will do. But if you're into your photography, it's worth carrying a camera because you've got some golden moments wherever you look. Spare sunglasses are a great idea. You're likely to go to some sort of great place to have a bit of a mountain lunch and maybe a cheeky beer if you're that way inclined. So it's good to have some sunglasses when you're off the bike so your eyes don't get too tired straining like mine are right now. Chapstick's a good idea because up in the mountains, air's a bit thin, it can be quite dry and the sun can really dry your lips out. And some sunblock as well. Even if you've got sun cream on, the back of your neck can get it really bad, your nose can get it, the ears, if you burn your ears, that really hurts. So make sure you pay attention to having some good sun cream with you. Finally, a map of the area. Wherever you're riding, doesn't matter if it's lift operated, carry a map so you're familiar with what's around. You might end up going off on a tangent and taking a track down that's not the right track. You need to know how to get back to base, or more importantly, how to get on another chairlift quicker so you get some more runs in. So yeah, just go prepared. Consider who you're riding with, how long you're riding for. If you're out all day, take some food as well. Okay, so thanks for getting those questions in. So that was a little bit of an Ask Tech Alpine special. If you've got any more questions, let us know with the Ask Tech hashtag down there in the comments below. For a couple more cool tech related videos, click down here for some multi-tool hacks. Pretty funny video by all accounts from Henry there. I think it's one of his best yet. And click up here for my pro bike check on Martin Ashton's tandem, that random tandem. That thing's insane. If you love what we do here at GMBN Tech, give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to comment, share and subscribe. Cheers guys.